This podcast is brought to you by The Pod Tower, hosted by the Watchtower Database. Visit youtube.com/thepodtower for informative, hilarious DC animation-themed podcasts and live streams every week. And check out the Watchtower Database for DCAU video essays, timelines, fan theories, and more. And please, enjoy the show.
Intergang.
Hello, anybody watching or listening to this. I'm here with quite the cavalcade of awesomeness, for lack of better terms. We're talking about the episode of Justice League Unlimited, Fearful Symmetry, today, which I have the entire crew of behind it, essentially. Well, besides animators, you know, Dan animated everything, right? That's how it works. Yeah. We got director Dan Riba, friend of the show. He's been here multiple times. I think you're all friends at this point. We got Stan Berkowitz, who wrote the story for this episode, and then Bob Goodman, who wrote the teleplay. So thank you all for being here. I already said that before we started, but I'm going to say it again.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Exactly.
I kind of want to just start off. I didn't mean to time it this way, but yesterday was the 20-year anniversary of JLU beginning, like the first episode's premiere. And I mean, it made me feel old, so I can't imagine. I'm sorry. But
we're used to that already. Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is that looking back on how long ago that started? I mean, did you think that it would have this lasting of an impression, or were you pretty set and like, yeah, we know this is good by that point?
At this point for me, I kind of did. I mean, it was old school for me. I already thought Batman was going to last forever, and it kind of did. So
It definitely has.
I mean, theoretically, animation tends to last longer because it doesn't look as dated as live action. So we shouldn't have been surprised. But, you know, TV, movies, even going back to the very first movies in the silent era, it was always considered a disposable medium.
Mm-hmm.
But also to your point, James, about like, did we think we were doing something good? And the answer is damn right we did.
Yeah. No, we thought this was awful. Yeah.
And now, as you know, but to repeat kind of as a little bit of a background, I was much more of an outsider, specifically to the Justice Leagues, plural,
right?
Than the other shows you've covered here. I mean, we always knew we were doing good stuff. And in particular, to these guys' credit, and again, I said, speaking as an outsider, Bruce, the gentleman you see here before you, the whole team, took a very bold move to protect the quality of the show that I really respected and wished that I'd had the gumption to do in a similar situation, which was get it away from Kids WB. You've heard the tribulations involved with doing shows there, and they were smart enough to say, well, let's do it on a different network.
Yeah, and from what I can tell, kind of gave a lot more leeway to what we were able to do, especially on Toonami, which was, you know, aimed at definitely the kind of latter teenage group of demographic there. So I was in that by the time the show was on, so that it was perfect timing for me to be watching this. Yeah,
I talk about that switch in my book. I was working on Static Shock for the Kids WB, and Rich Vogel came in at a perfect time where I was dealing with what Bob will tell you were kind of difficult censor notes from the Kids WB, and said, hey, Stan, do you want to work on something for Cartoon Network, which is the Justice League, the first Justice League. And I had just gotten the notes from Kids WB, and I said, yes, Rich. I will
That was the Static episode with, there was some line, right, that you were so upset about.
The line was where Static's powers were, They exploded. He became much more powerful than he thought.
Yeah, the solar flares.
He tries to jump over a building. He winds up in the desert, and the line was when he lands in the desert among the cacti and the coyotes, he says, "I better get frequent flyer miles for this." Okay, don't laugh. It's not that funny, guys. It was never a funny line. So the note I get was, "Can you just say I hope I get frequent flyer miles for this?" And I thought, oh yeah, aggressive speech. I better get something. Or do I hope I get something? And that just did it.
That was enough.
Rich happened to come in that day, and I said, I'm there.
That was the moment.
When we did the Aquaman episode, and Aquaman has to saw off his hand to get out of a trap. Yeah. The only censor note we got from Cartoon Network was, "You're not going to actually show him cutting off his hand on screen, are you?" No. He goes, "Okay, that's my only note. Bye."
Yeah.
Never again.
We trust you. Yeah.
To show how this all ebbs and flows, though, and I imagine it still continues to. Earlier, just a few years prior, like before that, like that final regime that Kids WB took over, when we were still Warner Animation and Kids WB all under one roof under the guidance of Gene McCurdy, Paul Dini used to comment on how wonderful it was compared to stuff they'd done in years prior.
Right, yeah, Fox and everything.
To get to do a show where someone could punch somebody.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it just
Well, I'm glad that it scaled up then and not the other way around, because that could have been bad. Yeah.
James, can I ask Bob a question?
Of course.
Taking over for you.
Bob, very well.
How did you said you were away for a while and you were an outsider. How did you get involved with Justice League? Did I just call you and say, "Bob, what are you doing?" Did you call me, or what happened there?
The specifics of whether you called me or I called you for this particular assignment, I can't speak to. My guess is you called me, but I can speak to the sort of the broader situation. And James, you've heard some of this, and Dan and Stan, you were there. For reasons relating very much to the stuff we're talking about, I had grown very disillusioned with my time in animation toward the end of Zeta Project.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah. You've probably heard the story how in this sort of final months of my meetings with the Kids WB execs, I literally carried a sheet of paper in my pocket with just the words "I quit" on it, just so I could have it handy,
flash it at any time.
Here's my resignation, and so I kind of left animation completely for about a year and a quarter when Zeta Project ended, and started the process of trying to transition into live action work. And about a year and a quarter into that, as one would expect, my health insurance ran out and I hadn't gotten, jobs elsewhere yet. And I started, making phone calls to my old friends like Alan Burnett and Stan. And I think the first freelance I was able to rustle up back in animation was a Static Shock. Stan wasn't on it anymore, but Alan was running it at that time. And then somewhere after that, whether it was me knocking on Stan's and Dwayne's door or them coming to me, I got about 4 JLUs that I wrote over the next year.
Okay, so I will tell you where Bob went during that year and a half. He went to the crossroads. No, he went to the crossroads like Robert Johnson. I'm glad you guys
really did.
I hope all your listeners know.
Right.
Robert Johnson's story briefly was he was a blues musician in the 1930s, a good one. Then he went away, and the rumor was he went to the crossroads because when he came back, he was just demonic.
Mm-hmm.
He was brilliant. So we will find out if Bob ends up dying of drinking bad alcohol, or has his throat slashed by a straight razor during a bar fight, or by
it's just gotten dark.
I was just gonna say,
we will know if Bob actually went to the crossroads.
Or maybe we'll know that Stan did it, I guess, at this point.
Stan was born at the crossroads.
He's thought about this for a while.
He's always had that dark edge. I thought you meant Crossroads Vegan Restaurant in Beverly Hills. I did go to a couple of times during those years.
Well, that covers the alcohol, the possible neck slashing. Yeah. Let's talk about Fearful Symmetry real quick. Bob, coming off of the Zeta Project stuff that we're talking about, if I want to use that as some sort of transition here, was it your idea to toss the Zetas into this and I know they had appeared in Justice League before as little training robots and stuff, but It's a very blatant, there's a Zeta,
Right. No, 1,000% no, it was not. And I didn't know that was a decision that Dan and the gang had made until I saw the cut. And I was very, very flattered. I do know a little bit, like the first draft of that story. Mm-hmm. And again, remember, so the way it worked for me on the Justice Leagues Stan and Dwayne would hand me an outline, a completed outline of a story, just for me to write the script. So I would kind of get the story fully formed, and they'd already had all of the internal conversations that I wasn't privy to. So in that first outline that I wrote the first draft of the script off, there wasn't a robot at all. There was a female masked mercenary like the other mercenaries who blurred around with super speed.
Okay.
Presumably Galatea wearing a mask. For reasons I can guess, between draft 1 and draft 2, they decided let's not do that and said we're going to do a battle robot instead. But even at that point, no one gave me an indication that it was going to be a proto Zeta.
Just
Maybe
to not reveal her
decision
too early in this episode, I suppose, because she pops up soon after that to kill General Hardcastle, and that's kind of her reveal there. So,
you guys want to speak to why the decision to change from her being in that scene to a robot?
If either of you remember that was a thing.
I have no memory, but clearly it was the right decision because it's best to have her. The first scene of hers be at Hardcastle.
Exactly.
Right, because it's too much of a giveaway to do it the original way.
And honestly, the reason it was reused was cost. I mean, we already had the design, and it fit the storyline as well because they were government issued. So it was like, oh, where'd they get them? Oh, yeah, well through this, So it all worked out.
You mean you didn't just do it to make me feel good?
And yes, and that too.
I'll edit out that first part. Yeah. I guess this is kind of a 2-part question for anybody. Did all the stuff with this is the first essentially Cadmus focused episode of the entire show. And as we got deeper and deeper into that stuff, it called back to every obscure thing you could think of in Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, all that stuff was tying in, even Zeta Project, because there's this robot there. Did you ever think like, oh, this is too much? Like people don't have access to these episodes on home video at this point, like thinking, or were you fine with, it won't be too confusing for audiences to remember these, who's Dr. Milo from BTAS and stuff like that?
I don't think there was a moment of confusion. I mean, the stuff's there, but if you don't know it, I don't remember anything about this episode, honestly. So when I rewatched it the other day, but clearly I'm not going to remember who Dr. Milo was or any of that stuff. But I thought that the episode played fine during that half hour. I don't think that there was any obscure stuff in it that people were going, gee, I don't understand what's happening here.
Yeah.
It's not there.
I mean, that whole Hardcastle scene is full of him, that volcano woman, she was one of ours, all that kind of stuff where, that goes by so quickly that even if you don't know what he's talking about, you just assume it's some kind of shady thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's admitting to everything. By the way, the guy who played that was a very old friend of mine. We became pals. Yeah, we became pals.
Napier.
While we were shooting a skin flick in 1974. My first job out of film school, and nice. The star of the film.
Dan, did you have anything to say on that one else? Because I want to throw in some stuff, but you first.
Because it didn't matter that there were these Easter eggs because it all flows naturally anyway. So if you didn't know, it doesn't take anything away from it, and all it does is enhance the show if you do know. And the backstory, Supergirl actually talks about legacy. She describes what happened to Superman. So if anyone hadn't watched the Superman series, there you go. There's your shot where you explain what happened before. So
we did our job, catch people up. But also, James just kind of addressed your question from another direction. We had superfans. In fact, not just us. Yeah. There was such a thing as superfans and discussion boards and an internet and all that.
Right.
Even back then, and people, would record things obsessively on their VCRs. And I hate to break it to you, you are far from the first person and did everything in a continuity in a canon.
Oh, I know.
These guys know a fellow writer and good friend of ours, Joe Coor, for years tried to do a book for DC Publishing, putting all of the DCAU into a continuity, into a canon.
Dang.
And you're succeeding where he didn't, because he kind of tore his hair out.
I mean, I won't take all the credit, but it is a lot of fun.
Impossible to do.
Yeah.
But the point is, there were people doing that. There was no doubt that fans, that people watching the shows followed all the stuff that closely and had all their.
Yeah, I guess those moments are kind of like, that's for you. Like you.
And a lot of those fans worked in the building too.
Yes.
Yeah. To my point. Yeah. The point of my story. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys know that you would go much further with the question after this episode in the show? I guess this is more of a Dan question than anything, but he's kind of a breakout character from this episode, but he also feels just like your Booster Golds or your Captain Adams or anything in this particular story, where he's like, it's just for this one. This is the focused Justice League guy. Yeah.
What happened was Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah.
The script was great. You guys knocked it out of the park. It was fantastic. It worked great. But because he was so appealing, he was so magnetic in the role. I remember in the booth, we were just like, oh, we got to have him come back. We got to do more. And obviously he was always going to have more to do, but they really okay, now he's got to really shine. And, because it was just the fact that he committed to that song, was one of those things where it was just, okay, we love this guy. He'll do anything for us. And
we should have used him more for Scarecrow, you said.
He was so good. He was so good.
Yeah.
So
from my notes, he was one of only two names you guys were even considering for the part from day one. It was, I don't know if I should mention the other actor just because you didn't get with him. But it's funny, Dan, that you mentioned the song. I have a question for you, Dan. That I don't, or Stan, I don't know if you guys will know, but there was a lyric in the song that you ended up not using. And the reason it's meaningful to me was that, and James has heard this before, when any of us, not at the producer level or story editor level, whether I was in the building or not, when you'd write a script, we'd get back Bruce's notes with big red pencil on the pages. And there was a lyric of the song that he clearly liked. There's like a giant ha with an exclamation point next to it that made him laugh. And that's the line you guys didn't use. And I have my guesses why it didn't make the cut. But so the line, it's supposed to, in the script, it only appears when Question is mumbling to himself. It's not when you hear the Britney Spears-esque. It's Cree, actually. It's Cree Summer singing it.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
It's not when you hear the song, but when you kind of do the reprise.
When he's throwing the plant
Question is examining the lock and mumbling to himself. And the line is, uh-oh, fell in love again. Last night after I swore off men. And I remember, so Bruce really liked that joke, and then it doesn't show up in the show.
Oh.
So what happened?
I don't know. I don't know if I have to listen and see if we ever have a recording of the entire song.
I was going to say we need the full cut.
Whether she actually sang it.
If you have a recording of the entire song, I would love
that would be.
Cree's got a few albums out. I have her music on playlists on my phone that it'll come up randomly. I'm like, yeah, it's Max from Batman Beyond is singing this song. Yeah. So I've seen this in the past, and we're talking about stuff that was cut out of the script and whatnot. The original title for this episode just being Galatea, was that a thing? Do any of you remember this at all? It showed up on from Warner Brothers episode guides for the episode, all the way up until the week of, and then it was Fearful Symmetry from there on, and on the DVDs and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Galatea, it's Pygmalion and Galatea. I mean, that's what this story is, really. And then you don't find out who Pygmalion was until the very end when you realize it's Hamilton.
Mm-hmm. What was the decision, if you can remember, of the switch to because it's the same Blake poem, the Tiger, Burning Bright, all of that for Fearful Symmetry. What was the switch over there, if you can remember?
That would have to have been Bruce, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Did he just really love that poem?
yeah, he's a pretty literate guy,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, and I know that the original, I think Michael Reeves suggested, I think he wrote the first Tiger, but you know, it kind of made sense.
Mm-hmm.
It really kind of made sense for this show, because it really is about that. And maybe Galatea, a little, obtuse for the kids, but
Sure.
I don't think we ever really worried about that. So that's not really an issue.
Yeah,
Not
no.
like Beautiful Symmetry is less.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was about to say, like, maybe it would be hard to pronounce, but you named an episode Tabula Rasa, so it's not like it's
Exactly.
yeah.
I assumed it was for the same reason, like we were talking about, that she was taken out of the set piece outside of Star Labs. Why give away where the story's going?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I don't think she's called Taya throughout until
Until the
finally
very
find
end.
out
Right,
the very end.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives it away.
It gives it away to the two people.
That would know what that is. Yeah.
But they are the two people we're writing it to.
Yeah.
Kids? Nah.
So I guess that kind of answers the whether the Greek myth was a very purposeful thing, and of course it must be, because I mean, I hadn't, until you said it a second ago, Stan, I hadn't even made the Hamilton connection with that. Like, oh, of course, duh, like he brought her to life and all that stuff. So yeah, that's perfect. I've always been curious so when you guys did Star-Crossed for Justice League, the note from the higher ups about you can't make Hawkman. Like a bad guy, you have to, swap Katar Hall's name around into an anagram and turn him into a completely new character and do all this stuff. Was that ever any note on that same kind of line for not making Power Girl evil? Or was that just a completely new, we just want to throw our own spin on this character and it just happened to work out that way?
I think it was just a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do your own spin.
Dan, you look like you were brimming at the...
No, it's just, I seem to remember like there's something about the cape that we weren't allowed to use it or we shied away from it just so that they wouldn't like tell us, we can't really literally make it Power Girl, just sort of Power Girl adjacent.
Right.
But we did at some point have some kind of red towel or something in later on. And that way she would kind of evoke the cape.
So that wasn't any kind of, hey, don't make her a bad guy or anything like that. It was just the way to do it, like much like how you would do your own spins on other characters, Tim Drake and Kyle Rayner and that kind of stuff.
I mean, it isn't her. So,
yeah, that's true.
It's so, it just looks like her.
Yeah. You did end up bringing Hawkman in later on in Justice League Unlimited, like the real Hawkman. Any thoughts ever in that final season or a future season to have brought in like the real Power Girl or anything?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't recall. And also like the whole Earth 2 thing would have been kind of
right.
Discomplicated. So
yeah, that's something I'm bringing up in the video is how the DCAU's version of Earth 2 was that Earth 2.5 with the Justice Guild. So it's like you either have to create another one of those or even just come up with a completely new backstory for her, which you've already done with Galatea. So it's kind of pointless to maybe do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was bummed that you guys made Dr. Hamilton a bad guy.
Well, okay, there's a quick question. I've seen in interviews with Bruce Timm that he didn't like Professor Hamilton as a character.
Hated Professor Hamilton.
Yeah. Why is that? Do we know? Is this a personal thing?
Just a boring expositional character.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
It was very tough to find like anything not snooze fest to do with him. I was a defender of the guy. On Superman, I liked that Superman had someone he could talk to.
Yeah.
I liked that, he had someone to go to for his gack. And so I was kind of the most vocal defender of Professor Hamilton. But so I was sad when he went.
He got a styling new
guy.
hairdo or facial hairdo there for Justice League Unlimited. So that I've always thought that he looked better. At least gave him a design upgrade. Yeah,
I remember going back and watching Legacy again as we were getting this one started, and I wasn't in the room when it was decided that Hamilton was going to be the bad guy and all that stuff. I didn't realize at that point until I read the script and it was like, oh my goodness. And then I went back and I watched and I saw the scene where like we planted the seed
Mm-hmm.
and we really weren't intending back then to make him a bad guy. That wasn't really, but that whole thing of like, I thought he was my friend, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, it
But
was
now,
like,
yeah,
there
yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
There you go. It's there. We just, you know, and it was a great callback to something that we weren't really going to run with back then, but
Mhm.
you know, it's like, well, let's take that football now, you know, let's do it.
I had taped Legacy when it first aired, but then Toonami also did a run where right before Twilight premiered, they showed Legacy again right before that as kind of like you got to remember why Superman hates Darkseid or whatever.
Yeah.
And I taped it then too. And watching it that time, it was more apparent than ever to me that was, I wonder if they're going to do something with that with Professor Hamilton. Like he looked really upset about Superman picking him up for 3 seconds, you know? and so whenever it got to this kind of stuff, I think it's Clash maybe is the first episode where you actually kind of get hints that Hamilton's doing doo-doo things other than Galatea here at the end of this, that it was like, oh yeah, thank you. You are doing something with that. So I appreciated it. I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
For Panic in the Sky later on in the show, where Galatea comes back and we have she battles Supergirl on the Watchtower and everything. She ends up essentially being fried to death with electricity, and you get the kind of, Dan and you and I have talked about this before, where a character's not really dead if they're sitting there going, you know, like you give the little thing,
Yes,
and it's an
Keep
indication.
alive groan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Is in your guys' minds, is that an indication that she didn't actually die in that scene, or do you find her to be? Obviously, this is not going to be like a tell me what's the canon answer to this or whatever, but just in your opinions, I suppose. If you have opinions.
Well, we never saw her again.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I mean,
I'm sure that was kind of the end of her character arc regardless, so whether or not you would bring her back, but
I wish we had brought her back, actually. I thought she was cool, but I kind of also see it's kind of, you know, she's awfully powerful. You know,
Right.
It's kind of, you know, yeah, I don't know.
Bob, answer the question.
I have nothing to contribute to this. I wasn't in the room where it happened.
Yeah, I get you. If you could just say yes or no.
Do you remember anything, Stan, of any talk about bringing
No one's
her
ever
back?
really dead.
You
Right,
know,
there
I
you
left
go.
early. I left in the middle of this. I got an offer from an English company.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So I took off. I was replaced by Matt Wayne.
Yeah.
This was near the end of it, near the end of the JLU season.
Yeah, he
Right.
wrote a lot of the final Legion of Doom season. Yeah.
You guys did get to kill people though on the show, which was, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no more marked difference between Cartoon Network and Kids WB than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Okay, so she is dead. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for answering the question. I assume that you guys never really spoke too much with the writers and artists of the tie-in comic that was going along with this show, the Justice League Unlimited comic. I know, Stan, you wrote an issue of Justice League Adventures. You guys have dabbled in here and there in that world, but from whenever I talk to Tim Levins or Scott Peterson or anybody that worked on these, it tends to be the story that they rarely got anything from you guys. Not that that was anything, you know, malicious on your end or anything, but and vice versa, where, you know, the discussions weren't really happening. They were just kind of going off of what they saw on TV. Interestingly, Power Girl does appear in the JLU tie-in comics in the background a few times, and I suppose just kind of wanting to clarify whether or not any sort of discussions were had between the two teams in terms of that being Galatea or not, or if whether that's just I didn't even know that was a thing. Yeah.
I never had discussions. I mean, when I wrote one for them, clearly I talked to the editor a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but they really didn't have a direct communication line to the show.
Yeah.
Except, you know, when I as a freelancer wrote for them at DC, that was it. That was the only communication I know.
Though to what you said, James, not only wasn't there any malice, if you, as a writer, if you wanted Bruce's respect, the way to it was to write comic books, not to write television.
Bob, did you write any of the DCAU tie-in comics? I can't remember. I didn't think so, yeah.
Never have.
Well, there's always a room for a Zeta Project continuation series. We got to get people on that for sure.
They have my number.
I know. I think they have. Well, I've only got a couple other things I wanted to ask about. The conclusion of this season with Epilogue, we get to see a little bit of that Cadmus has gone on to be still like in effect, like still in existence in some fashion in order to make Project Batman Beyond happen and all that kind of thing. Was there ever any discussion of what that what that meant essentially? Because it seemed that with the disposal of Lex Luthor Brainiac Combo Man, that Cadmus was not necessary anymore, and yet we still see it pop up every now and then, assuming not doing bad guy stuff. So I don't know.
None that I'm aware of. You know,
Yeah.
I think it was one of those things where it was convenient that it had existed.
Mhm.
So the idea that it's there in the backdrop, you know, that they can just like open the warehouse and, you know, plug the stuff back in. Hey, look, we got it going again. You know?
I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but what was great about this show when we're talking about Cadmus, but obviously more broadly than that, these guys were talking about big ideas and like issues of, you know, the about government, you know, secrecy and overreach and the what's wrong with vigilantism and like just big, like important stuff that they were taking swings at. Very mature subjects and handling it like over very long arcs. And I mean, I've commented a lot of times over the years about how just all the stuff we were doing at Warner Animation was ahead of its time in terms of the kind of storytelling we were doing on television. That, like, you know, Primetime wasn't as into long, complicated arcs as we were back then. And we were supposedly doing it for kids. But in particular, JLU got real sophisticated, real mature.
Yeah.
And I imagine, I mean, along with the guys you see here, I'm sure a lot of that was Bruce and a lot of that was Dwayne. Is that safe to say?
Yes.
And, yes. And James is
James.
But the thing was that
Tucker.
I know.
there was nothing about any of those shows that a kid couldn't enjoy. I mean, a kid could sit there, watch the whole thing. Some of the concepts might be over their heads, but there's plenty of action. There's usually a strong emotional core going through it. And it worked for both, I thought.
Yeah.
That it resonated. I mean, there's certain, in children's literature, there are certain things you can come back to. You enjoyed certain aspects of it as a child, then you see it again, you go, wait a minute, there was this whole undercurrent there that an adult could enjoy and understand. Maybe even change their opinion.
I mean, I always look to, any story that I end up writing, any sort of cinematic thing I'm working on, I end up realizing that a lot of that, like I didn't, for instance, here's an example. I didn't realize how much I was pulling from your guys' like storyboarding and staging and stuff in superhero cartoons when I'm filming like a live action movie, because I'll find myself, oh, this would be a really cool shot, or there should be a moment where the character kind of looks down to think for a second and then realizes something and then looks at the camera, and I'll realize like, oh, Batman did that in, you know, this episode and I didn't even do that on purpose. So I would say that you're entirely right as far as writing and staging goes, is like I'm watching it as a 13-year-old and going through, punch 'em, Superman, go, but also absorbing all of this very sophisticated writing and you know, development of the story across 3 different shows, 5 different shows, 6 different shows. Yeah.
And visual language. That's what you're talking about, is visual language.
Yeah. Great directors, great storyboard artists.
Yeah.
And we're also taking stuff from one of the best comic geniuses, Jack Kirby, where in Superman we were pulling big chunks, with the fourth world, the dark side, and all of that stuff as a big through line. But the cast, people forget that Cadmus came from Kirby. That was part of the whole Jimmy Olsen comic line. That was like all that stuff came from that. And so we were pulling from that as well. And it was really cool. I actually got some visuals of the Cadmus based on the Kirby drawings. So it is literally that.
Isn't correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Cadmus also from Greek mythology? Is that true? It's from some mythological something.
Believe the dragon seeds that the seeds the dragon's teeth that form the army of the dead. I think that's I believe that was
Look it up.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. We could Google that.
Yeah, I think Stan's got it
right now.
Kirby was a big mythology buff.
Yeah.
He's founder of Thebes, city of antiquity, I think in Egypt, son of Phoenix, and brother of Europa. Europa was carried off by Zeus, king of the gods, and Cadmus was sent to find her, blah, 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 blah.
Well, there we go. We're being educational. Thanks, Stan. Well, is there anything else that I can pull from you guys in terms of Power Girl and Galatea, bringing that character into the show? Yeah, like how did that idea come to use her at all? To use the Power Girl style character versus any other, heavy hitting experimental character like Doomsday or something that you could have thrown.
Well, James, that would take me back to my Russ Meyer days. And Bob's line in
How
there.
long do we have?
I laughed out loud at Bob's line about Galatea being a little older and a little more developed.
Yes, mature than you.
I think that might have been your line. That wasn't in the outline.
It was in the outline.
I'm not sure.
No, I would never put in anything like that. No.
It doesn't seem like you. No.
I'm like,
one of the things that I never get a chance to point out is Butch, when he was boarding on the show. Butch Lukic did he decided to have Kolchak, the Night Stalker, be one of the reporters that's in the bar, and so that was like a little homage to a show we all loved, and we thought he worked really well, so we just went with it, and he drew it in the board.
We loved it, and I was in it.
Really?
Yes.
No kidding.
Friend of mine from college was like doing the post production, and I ran into him on the Universal Studio lot one day. He says, "Come here, you got to help me out." I used my hand for some inserts where I pulled a tag off. I pulled a tag off of a barking Rottweiler. You could see my hand.
Wow.
My television debut.
Not your most famous body part to be committed to film.
From what we've learned today.
James, this is not a segue off that line. Can I share? Do I have sharing privileges right now?
Of course, yeah.
Here's the outline. I want to show Stan. She looks exactly like me, maybe a little more mature than you. The outline.
Yeah.
So it is Stan.
But by the way, these outlines were the product of a group meeting. Everyone I worked on, anyone worked on, it was always Dwayne, Bruce, and me sitting in, there's like an outdoor patio that Warner Brothers had when we were in Sherman Oaks. And the three of us would simply spend an afternoon talking about it. Yeah. And whoever was the person whose credit is on that episode for story was essentially the recording secretary.
Mm-hmm.
It was really the product of all three of us.
Yeah.
And this one, I'm the one who actually put it on paper.
Yeah.
So that explains the process, I think.
Yeah.
It worked really well because pretty much everyone who needed to be involved with it was right there, and you never got, notes from this network or that studio person or a censor or anything like that. It was a very quick, very straightforward process.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked it a lot. I remember at Dwayne's memorial, Bruce got up and during his speech talked about those sessions, with Dwayne, and said it was some of the best times he ever had doing this stuff. Was just
imagine,
story ideas.
Yeah, to be a fly on the wall for sure. Like that.
Well, you would have been bored.
I don't know about that.
No, those sessions can be fairly boring, because sometimes you're going down the wrong avenue and you have to come back and start again. But they may have been boring to an outsider, but it enabled us to get a lot of work done very quickly, and without the usual, without the kind of thing that would happen at other places at other times where you get a lot of notes that force you to go back and redo it again and redo it again. We didn't have a lot of that. It went very smoothly.
The whole thing with Supergirl, being brought into the Star Labs at the end of Legacy, I assume back then you had no idea that you would do this cloning thing or anything like that. It was just happenstance that you had a reason she had already been there and they could have collected it and things like that.
I think the deal was just to do an episode about the Question. Just like an intriguing character.
Exactly.
Especially because he had just been in Watchmen, right? Watchmen?
Well, Rorschach, but the same
Rorschach.
idea. Yeah, the same character he was based on. Yeah.
I had never heard of Question before being assigned to do this script. And I ran into Bruce in the hall. And he asked me, "Do you know Question?" And I said, "No." He said, "I'll send you a few comics," which he did, to read about Question. He said, "But he's Rorschach. You know Rorschach, right?" But yeah, I can do that. I can write Rorschach.
That is a pretty funny, cyclical there. Yeah, that's good.
The idea was to have a paranoid character. It was really just a look at someone who was paranoid, and that's why I thought that Bob's script turned out so well, because it was a character study of a paranoid guy. And
he was he was really fun to do scenes with him and Green Arrow. They're a great contrast.
Yes.
No, it's perfect.
Their personalities are so different. Green Arrow is just so cynical at everything. He's very face value of stuff.
And Question has no face. So there you go.
There you go. I had written something in the script of him like Rorschach does, kind of pulling the mask up halfway to eat and be all gross.
Yeah.
None of that made it into the episode.
It was the Green Arrow and Question scenes, Bob, that made me make that reference to you having gone to the Crossroads.
No. You're too kind.
The silly stuff that we threw in, that we gave the show a boy band.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that boy band, the W Boys, were our design crew. It's
right.
Steve Lines, Eric White, I think Tommy Tejeda, a few other guys are in that in that group.
Oh, that's great.
And so I don't know who that Glenn Wong. I forgot who else was caricatured in there.
Yeah.
But that was actually a gag that had been done, and it's in her room.
It's in Supergirl's room too.
It's her room too. So it was awesome. It was awesome.
Well, cool. Yeah, I don't know if you had any closing thoughts on this episode. I know we covered a lot of stuff. I was going to ask about Green Arrow and Supergirl's relationship. They kind of went on to be kind of an uncle-niece sort of thing going on by the end of the show. If that was, again, just something that kind of came out of the chemistry of this script and just went on from there, or if that was pre-planned at all.
Well, you already kind of feel it in this episode.
Yeah.
It already feels that way.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
They already have the relationship.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy the stuff like that where it comes from, you have a very solid episode such as this, and you can pick things from that to keep going on further episodes rather than, trying to plan any kind of, well, this person's going to fall in love with this person and this person's going to like this guy and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of happens. I've always appreciated that about
a lot of it is you do the episode and then people look back and go, wait a minute, there's some interesting things. Sort of unintentional Easter eggs that we should crack open and see what happens with them.
Like Hamilton being afraid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's like the Huntress and Question relationship was like one of those organic things as well. That it just worked.
Yeah.
He's such a fun character. He pairs well.
Yeah.
with other characters. James, you were going to ask. You had in your pre-questions you sent us whether Galatea would have killed Question if given the.
I kind of skipped that because I figured that was going to be one where you all kind of went, But if you have a thought on that, I'm happy.
Let's see. We can see what each person thinks, but I think the answer is for sure she would have.
I don't know. That one of the key elements in the story is that Galatea has acquired some of the conscience
of
Supergirl.
That's why she doesn't. But
that's why she hesitates.
Yeah,
but evidence, everywhere else through the episode suggests that she pushes through that conscience problem.
She blows up a car while flying around that's on the highway that you assume someone was driving that car.
She does a lot of wanton killing. I think it may take her a moment longer because this is someone Supergirl actually knows, but but I think she would have killed him.
I mean, even Supergirl was getting annoyed with Question in the episode, so it's
not like they were close.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of Question, I did have one final little thing with him, which is, do any of you know what the true purpose of Aglets are? I hear it's sinister, but I did not.
I had to look it up. You know what they are, right?
Yeah, it's the ends of shoelaces. Yeah.
Obviously, all pushing of plastics in our lives is big oil.
Question would agree, I'm sure.
There you go. Wait. You can have metal aglets.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it doesn't have to be that.
Checkmate, Bob. Yeah.
None of Stan's shoes have aglets anyway because Stan only wears cowboy boots.
No, there's apparently a song in the Disney show Phineas and Ferb about aglets. That just describes what they are. It's a very catchy tune. I was too old for that show when it started, so I don't know that song at all. But anytime that anyone is wondering what those are called, I'm like, I know. The Question taught me what aglets are. Don't worry about it.
That was a Dwayne thing. I remember him talking about aglets. He for a while. Yes. It was like he just loved weird words. And he, Bilkrums and Aglets and things like that.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. I'm very appreciative that you all took the hour or so to talk about this with me. I know a lot of this kind of stuff. I'll try to make it a mix of, oh yes, these are obviously questions we could talk about for a while. We remember these things, and then stuff like, what are the purpose of aglets? So I hope that you'll indulge me in that kind of stuff in the future as well, because I really appreciate it, and it's very helpful to the process over here. So as you can see, I have way too many things to work on to do with your work in the meantime, but it's always great to talk to each of you, and to have you on here as a group is phenomenal. So thank you very much.
Much appreciated. You'd make Dan and I very happy if you mentioned the book.
I was going to give you time to plug stuff if you wanted. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about upcoming things. Only Bob. Ready, go. I'm just kidding.
I got nothing.
Well, okay.
Nothing, Bob?
I got things in the works.
Okay. Good.
Nothing to announce.
We'll hear more. Dan and I worked on a book. I did the writing. Dan did the artwork. It's called Beyond the Bat. It should be available from Amazon probably right around Labor Day.
Okay.
There's a lot. It's the subtitle is Secrets of a Superhero Scribe.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine what it's about. It's about this stuff. And in fact, some of the stuff we actually talked about tonight is in the book.
Awesome. Okay.
But there's also a lot of other weird stuff in it. Yeah. There's a chapter about what it was like to work with Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even a chapter about what might have been the writer's room when they wrote the Old Testament. So all kinds of weird stuff.
The Justice League episode, the Old Testament.
Writer's room from 2,500 years ago and what it must have been like in there.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting stuff, I hope. And
I thought
you saw the cover that Dan did.
Yes,
right?
I did. Yes, it's wonderful. I wish I could show it here right now, but maybe I'll plop it on screen here while we're talking about it. Yeah.
Well, you have
the New Testament. I thought the New Testament probably came from a room similar to the executives we were working with on the earlier. Somebody said about the Old Testament, God is mean, he's unrelatable. What if he had a kid?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that is very. What if you had Robin when is in every episode of the Bible?
You know, like a kid entry point. So this one's relatable.
That is exactly what happened, I think. But you can read all about it in the book.
Illustrated by Dan Riba. How many illustrations do you do besides the cover here?
Oh, gosh.
There's
10?
there's one
11?
for every chapter.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
Okay.
There are more than a dozen chapters too.
Yeah.
You got to draw Stan Lee in there?
No. Wow. I compensate. I draw other things.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, you probably have to deal with that.
Yeah, my first professional, can I say? With the illustrator, with Spider-Man. So
Ooh,
I got
okay.
to draw Spider-Man for it.
Awesome.
Yes. My first published Spider-Man drawing. Oh, and also, by the way, another plug for me. Sorry, Chicago. I'm going to be at the Fan Expo in a couple of weeks. So I'll be drawing commissions, all sorts of stuff.
I'm not sure if I'll have this up in time for this con that you're mentioning right now. So sorry. This has to come out after the Power Girl video, which I'm working on. I'll message you later, and then I'm flashing that con on screen right now.
Sure.
Yeah. Bob, do you ever go to any cons?
My joke about that is I'm a professional geek. When someone pays me to be there, or for that matter, he just invites me to be on a panel, and I show up.
Well, I won't take any more of you guys' time. I know we're all cooking right now, so I really appreciate it. I will reach out for if I have any quick follow-up things, but I'll try to keep the nerdiness level of the questions down as much as I can. I won't expect you to know, on frame 603 what was going on, but I'll let you know when the video's out and everything. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for this. I really appreciate it.
Intergang is hosted by the Watchtower Database. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for DC Animated Universe videos on a regular basis. This podcast is edited and produced by yours truly, James Strecker. Stay tuned for more new episodes of Intergang as we speak with some of your favorite writers, directors, voice actors, and more from the DC Animated Universe and beyond. Available on all your favorite podcast feeds and watchtowerdatabase.com. To support us on Patreon or nab yourself some sick merch, please visit the links in today's show notes. Thank you for supporting the show. Please leave us a 5-star review on your app of choice or leave us a comment on this podcast episode on the Pod Tower on YouTube. It helps tell the algorithm robots, hey, you should show this to more people, and that'd be just swell. Have a wonderful day, and all hail our Lord Darkside.
Intergang.